Welcome back to Latin American Today. My name is Rene, and I'm glad that you're back. Picture this. You're at a party, somebody's backyard. String lights, a speaker that's a little too small for the crowd is trying to fill. Look around the room for a second. The Colombians are by the grill. The Mexicans have colonized the kitchen. Every Latino gathering I've ever been to, the kitchen belongs to them, and nobody contests it. The Salvadoreños are by the door. We're always by the door. Mentally, we're already halfway gone. Nobody assigned these seats. Nobody had to. Somebody puts cumbia. Somebody else reaches over and switches it to norteño. Watch the room when that happens. That's not really a music argument. That's a small, quiet negotiation about whose culture gets to be the default setting in the room tonight. You call yourself Latino on a census form. You check the box without thinking twice. What else would you check? But in that backyard, you know exactly where you're from. And so does everyone else in that yard, whether they say it out loud or not. Here's the question I want to sit with today, and I'm not going to rush past it the way we usually do. When we say the Latino community, who exactly are we talking about? Because in my experience, doing outreach work for vulnerable Latin American communities, sitting in a church basement, standing in backyards just like the one I described, the community does not always recognize itself as one thing. We are not one people. We never have been. And today I want to tell you why that's not a tragedy. It's just the truth we haven't said out loud. Maybe you're listening from inside one of those national pockets right now. Maybe you're Mexican or Colombian or Honduran or Cuban or Brazilian. Maybe you've never set foot in a Latino backyard party in your life, and you're listening from somewhere else entirely differently. Just curious about what this is. Either way, stay with me. This episode isn't an attack on anyone's nationality. It's an honest look at a category most of us never choose, and almost nobody questions out loud. I'm going to walk through four fractures today: class, nation, color, and geography. And then I'm going to tell you why the gospel still asks something of us in the middle of all that fracture. So let's get into it. Let's start with the word itself, Latino, Hispanic. Where did it even come from? Because it didn't come from us. Hispanic was coined deliberately, bureaucratically, by the Nixon administration for the 1970 U.S. Census. Before that, the census just had you write in your country or your race, with no single category trying to gather all of us under one roof. The federal government needed a box to check. So somebody built one, and we've been living inside the box for over 50 years. I talked about this back in episode 3, when I named myself Cuscatleco, instead of Latino or Hispanic. But it's worth saying again, plainly. Here, Hispanic centers Spain. It tells you that you are defined by who colonized you, not by who you actually are. Latinidad is the cultural version of the same move, just with better marketing. Arlene Davila wrote the book on this, literally, Latinos Inc. And her argument is simple and a little devastating. Latinidad was built as a marketing demographic, a single audience that advertisers could sell soap, beer, and credit cards to. And the face chosen for that demographic was not indigenous, it was not black, it was mestizo, light skin, Spanish accented English, 2 parents, a stable job, a nice car in the driveway. That's not most of us. That's not most of the people I sit across from in this work. Davila's point isn't that Latino identity is fake. It's that the version that is sold back to us through advertising, through telenovelas, through every proud to be Latino beer commercial, was assigned by people trying to sell us something. And design choices like that are never neutral. Somebody decided which face sells. Somebody decided which accent sounds aspirational and which one sounds foreign. We didn't vote on any of it. We just absorbed it. The way you absorb a jingle you didn't ask to remember. So, when we say the Latino community, a lot of the time, what we're actually reaching for is a category invented by a government agency, then polished by an ad agency, not something we built from below, something handed to us, with the packaging already done. And look at what that packaging erases. 46 plus nations, Caribbean, Central American, South American, flattened into one noun. Class difference, erase. Colorism, erase. And we'll come back to that one. Indigenous identity and Afro-Latino identity, erase. The same erasure that colonial project ran 500 years ago, just rebranded for a new century. Latinidad promised solidarity. What it mostly delivers is a share marketing demographic. Nobody wants to talk about this one in church. It makes people uncomfortable. I'm going to talk about it anyways, because the discomfort is the point. There isn't one Latin American diaspora. There are waves, and the waves carry different cargo. Wave 1, the political refugees. El Salvador, Guatemala, Chile. Through the 70s and 80s, people who arrived with almost nothing, who built survival networks out of pure necessity, who were undocumented and stayed that way for years, sometimes decades. Wave 2, economic professionals, engineers, doctors, business owners, often from Mexico, Colombia, Brazil, Argentina, people who arrive with credentials already in hand, options that Wave 1 never had access to. Wave 3, recent economic migrants, agricultural work, construction, the service industry, often from rural communities, often indigenous, and treated accordingly even by their own. Now, watch what class does. Once we're all supposedly standing under the same Latino umbrella. It decides where you live, North Delta or Yaletown, a Fraser Valley farm work bunkhouse, or a Burnaby condo with a view. It decides what church you walk into and how you're treated the moment you do. It decides whether your kids play together after service and whether your Spanish sounds anything like theirs. It decides who gets called an immigrant and who gets called an expat. Same passport, stamp, same flight, completely different word, completely different respect. And the church, our church, the Latino church in the diaspora, often just imports the classes structure of the home country instead of disrupting it. Professionals in the front rows, workers in the back, leadership who looks exactly like the front row. I've sat in those rooms. I've watched a pastor introduce a visiting doctor by his full title and introduce a farm worker by his first name only, in the same service. 10 minutes apart. Nobody in that room thought they were doing anything wrong. That's exactly how class works when it's working well. Invisible, politely, with everyone's consent. I keep coming back to Gustavo Gutierrez because liberation theology has something to say here that almost nobody else is saying out loud. The preferential option for the poor does not have a postal code. It does not check your citizenship status at the door. It cuts across class lines inside our own community, not just between us and the dominant culture around us. When we say we want to help our people, which of our people do we actually mean? The ones who look like us, vote like us, earn like us? Now, we get to the part that's the hardest to say out loud. Because this part isn't about colonization or capitalism or some historical distant force. This part is about us. The jokes that aren't really jokes. There's a hierarchy inside Latino, and almost nobody admits out loud that it exists. In the US and Canada, Latino quietly defaults to Mexican. Mexico is the largest country, the largest diaspora, the loudest cultural footprint, and Central Americans become an afterthought. Sometimes we disappear completely. I've lived this directly. The Salvadoreño who gets asked, "Oh, you're Mexican, right?" And you just say yes, because explaining the difference to someone who knows nothing about geography, again, to somebody who isn't really asking, is exhausting. Then there's South American exceptionalism. Argentinians, Colombians, Chileans who will quietly, and sometimes not so quietly, distance themselves from Central American as a category, because in their minds, that category carries poverty, carries migration trauma, carries a stigma they don't want attached to their name. And the Caribbean, Puerto Ricans, Cubans, navigating an entirely different political reality in the US that fractures any pretense of unity even further. Here, where I live, I've watched Salvadorians, Guatemalans, and Mexicans work in the same fields, the same shifts, side by side, in the same heat. The solidarity is real, and the tension is real too. Both things at the same time. National pride that curdles into defensiveness, that we're not like them said quietly in Spanish, assuming the people across the room won't hear it, except they always hear it. But I have to tell you something else, because it would be dishonest to leave it out of this episode. My mother, my siblings, and I crossed through Mexico, undocumented, on our way to the United States. Before we came to Canada, we had no papers, no money, no claim on anybody's hospitality, none at all. We were exactly the kind of strangers a country has every reason to turn away. Mexican families opened their doors to us anyways. People who owed us absolutely nothing took us in, fed us, clothed us, gave us a roof, when they had every reason not to, when looking away would have cost them nothing. I was a child. I didn't understand then what it cost a poor family to feed 4 more mouths they've never met before. I understand it now. I understand it as a father, as someone who's had to stretch a budget further than it wanted to go. What they gave us was in excess. It was sacrifice, offered to strangers with no expectation of repayment and no way of knowing if we'd ever cross paths again. And with some of them, we never did. I'm not telling you that story to erase what I just said about the tension between Mexicans and Central Americans in today's diaspora. That tension is real, and I won't pretend otherwise. I'm telling you this story because it is also real. At the very same time, both things are true. That's the whole spine of this episode. We don't get to keep only the convenient half-truth. What this costs in practical terms today: Central American communities in Canada are often smaller, less resourced, less politically visible than Mexican or Colombian communities. And when grants get divided, when church leadership gets distributed, when political representation gets handed out, the smaller communities lose first, every time. And the bitter irony in all of these, the people who have the most in common, recently arrived, working class, treated as non-white by the wider society, are often the most divided from one another by nothing more than a flag. I think about this every time I hear someone use Latino as if it describes a temperament, a cuisine, a single shared childhood. It doesn't. My childhood, and a Mexican friend's childhood, and an Argentine colleague's childhood may share a language. Even that's not guaranteed. But the rest of it can almost be unrecognizable to each other. Different colonial histories, different relationship to indigenous ancestry, different reasons for leaving, if leaving happened at all. Stacking all of it under one word doesn't create unity. It just creates confusion that looks like unity from a distance. I covered this in depth back in episode 5, The Light is One in the Room, so I'm not going to rewalk all of it here. But I have to connect it to today's conversation, because colorism isn't just a wound we carry from a family Christmas. It's a political structure. The lighter you are, the more Latinidad claims you. The more doors open for you, the more you get to be the face of the community. On television, in politics, at the front of the church. Look who actually gets to speak for Latinos in public life. Now look at the range of skin color inside that group. That range will tell you everything you need to know about who this community has decided is representative and who has quietly decided is just background. This is the part where colorism and class and nation all collapses into the same mechanism. The lightest skinned communities tend to also be the ones with more generational wealth, more access to professional networks, more proximity to power in their country of origin, and that compounding advantage follows them into the diaspora. Meanwhile, the darker skin, more indigenous presenting, more recently arrived communities carry the heaviest weight and get the least microphone time to describe it. You cannot build solidarity on a hierarchy you refuse to name. Colorism is not only personal, it determines who leads, who gets believed, and who gets erased. Let me bring all this all the way home, to where I actually live and do this work. Metro Vancouver and the Fraser Valley hold one of the most diverse Latin American population in this entire country. Salvadoran, Mexican, Guatemalan, Colombian, Peruvian, Chilean, Brazilian, Venezuelan, all of it, right here. But we do not live in the same neighborhoods. We do not attend the same churches. We do not vote the same way. And a lot of us can't vote at all. The Spanish language church here is not pan-Latino, no matter what the sign out front says. It reflects whichever national and class community founded it. The Salvadorian church and the Mexican church and the Colombian church do not share a pulpit. Most weeks, we don't even know each other's names. And politically, we are nearly invisible. In the US, the Latino vote is at least a contested visible category. Politicians fight over it. However imperfectly, however cynically. In Canada, there's no equivalent category that most politicians can even see. The result, the concerns that actually affect us, agricultural labor conditions, immigration reform, family reunification, get championed by well-meaning advocates, but almost never by elected voices who actually come from inside this community. I see the consequences of these up close, every week in my outreach work. Community organizations competing for the same small pool of grant money instead of pooling it. Mutual aid that should exist, but doesn't, because the organizations identify with different national communities and have simply never been asked to collaborate. The need is enormous. The community, as a community, isn't there yet. I want to be precise about something. This isn't a failure of character. Nobody I work with woke up one morning and decided to withhold solidarity from their neighborhood on principle. It's a failure of infrastructure. Nobody built the bridge between the Salvadorian church on one side of the highway and the Mexican church on the other. Nobody converted the meeting with 3 different community organizations could have realized they were applying for the same grant and competing against each other instead of pooling their cases. Bridges like that don't build themselves. Somebody has to actually do the unglamorous work of convening in the room. Here's where I have to stop describing the problem and start asking what the gospel actually requires of us. Because if I don't, this is just sociology. And that's not what this show is for. Gutierrez's preferential option for the poor It's not a preference for people who look like you, talk like you, or come from where you come from. It is a structural commitment to whoever is on the underside of history, wherever they are, whatever flag they happen to carry. See, judge, act. I named this framework back in episode 4. If you see the fragmentation I've described today, class, nation, color, and you judge it honestly by the standard of the gospel, then the act that follows is to cross the line. Every one of those lines: national, class, color. Remember Pentecost? Acts chapter 2? The Spirit did not wait for cultural alignment before showing up. Every nation under heaven in the very same room, and nobody had to become someone else's first. And remember Romero? I told you this story in episode 4. He did not speak only for Salvadorians, for his own ethnic or national group. He spoke for the poor, full stop, wherever he found them, and he was killed at the altar for it. His radio homilies name atrocities across El Salvador without ever sorting the victims by tribe first. The gospel does not have a national team. So here's the provocation, and I'm not going to soften it. If you only feel solidarity with the people from your country, your class, your shade of brown, that's nationalism wearing a cross. It's not the gospel. Paul wrote it plainly in Galatians. There is neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female. He did not say those categories disappear: nation, class, color. All of it is still real, still shaping how the world treats you the moment you walk into a room. What he said is that those categories no longer get to determine your worth or your belonging. That is a much harder thing to actually live than simply pretending the categories don't exist. Notice something about that list too. Jew and Greek, an ethnic and national line, slave and free, a class line, male and female, every other hierarchy a first century mind could reach for. Paul wasn't writing a vague feel-good slogan. He was naming the actual fracture lines on his world, one by one. The same way, I want to name ours today. And then telling his readers that none of those lines get the final word anymore. The early church didn't pretend the lines weren't there. It just refused to let the lines decide who belonged at the table. So let's land this honestly. We are not one people. We never were. The colonial project invented that fiction. One Latin race, one European root, one Spanish tongue. And we have been performing that script for 500 years. The diaspora did not break us into fragments. We arrived already fragmented. The diaspora just put all of us in the same postal code and called it a community. That is not a reason for despair. It is a reason for honesty. Real solidarity does not require pretending the Argentine architect and the Guatemalan field worker share the same experience. It does not require erasing the wound between Guatemalans and Mexicans, the way Salvadorians get made invisible inside the bigger categories, the way some Colombians flinch at being associated with the stigma that is in theirs. Real solidarity names every one of those fractures, and chooses anyway to show up for each other. Practically, here where I live, that might look like a small, unglamorous thing. A Mexican-led organization and a Salvadorian-led organization sharing a grant application instead of competing for the same pool. A pastor inviting the congregation 3 towns over, different country of origin, different class, different shade of brown, to co-host a single service instead of a separate one. None of that makes the national or class differences disappear. It just refuses to let those differences be the final word on who shows up for whom. I named the tension between Mexicans and Central America earlier in this episode, and I'm not walking that back now. But I need to end by naming the other half of my own story, because it is just as true. Some of the best people I have met as an immigrant on this road, in this life, have been Mexican. People who love me, help me, share with me when they had absolutely no reason to. Solidarity for me is not a slogan. It's a debt I carry. A door that opened when I traveled out of El Salvador, when I had nothing at all to offer in return. And honestly, it never really closed. You can't love the Latino community. It's too abstract, too convenient. It lets you feel solidarity without ever having to extend it to one actual person standing in front of you. But you can love your neighbor, the one who speaks a different Spanish than you, whose flag isn't yours, whose skin is darker or lighter than yours, whose papers may not be in order the way mine weren't once. Start there. That's not pan-Latino solidarity. Not really. That's just the gospel, asking you to do the one thing it has always asked. Love the person in front of you. Hasta la próxima.